Imagine opening a 2,500-year-old book that reads like a hybrid of political thriller, resistance literature, and apocalyptic sci-fi, and then discovering it's been shaping world history, religious movements, and end times charts ever since. That's the Book of Daniel. In this crash course, we're going to unpack Daniel's kingdoms, visions, and historical context so you can actually understand what's going on beyond the lion's den and fiery furnace. Why do four beasts rise from the sea? Who is the mysterious Son of Man? What's with statues, rams, goats, and those cryptic 70 weeks? And how did a Jewish teenager in exile become a key voice about the rise and fall of empires? By the end, you'll see Daniel not just as a prediction manual, but as a deeply subversive book about hope, power, and faithfulness under pressure. Let's step into Babylon, meet Daniel, and start decoding this influential and often misunderstood book. In this video, we're building a big picture map of Daniel, who wrote it, when and why it was written, how the stories and visions fit together, and what those famous kingdoms might actually be. We'll move from the court tales, diet tests, dream interpretations, fiery furnaces, and lions' dens into the symbolic world of beasts, horns, and heavenly figures. We'll also keep asking a crucial question. What did Daniel mean for its original audience living under empire? And what does that mean for how we read it today? Stick with me to the end, because we'll finish with concise takeaways that pull the entire book into a single, memorable framework you can use in your own study. If you're into thoughtful Bible content that takes history and faith seriously, consider subscribing and tapping the notification bell so you don't miss future deep dives. For now, grab your mental notebook. We're heading to Babylon in 605 BC. To understand Daniel, we need the historical backdrop. Our story opens in 605 BC, when Babylon, under King Nebuchadnezzar, defeats Judah and begins deporting its elite to Babylon. Daniel and his friends are among those young exiles, smart, promising, and now ripped from Jerusalem into the heart of a pagan superpower. Babylon isn't just a city, it's propaganda embodied. Monumental walls, massive temples, the Ishtar Gate, the ziggurat that may echo memories of Babel. Everything screams, our gods, our king, our empire are unstoppable. Into that world, Jewish captives must learn the language, literature, and politics of their conquerors. This tension, faithful to Israel's God while serving inside imperial machinery, is the engine of Daniel. The book remembers Babylon, but most scholars think final shaping may stretch into the later Persian or even Hellenistic Greek periods, when new empires are repeating Babylon's arrogance. Daniel becomes a manual for surviving empire without losing your soul. The book of Daniel falls into two big halves. Chapters 1 to 6 are narrative stories. Chapters 7 to 12 are apocalyptic visions. Interestingly, the language shifts too. Parts are in Hebrew, parts in Aramaic, the international language of the day, fitting for a book about global empires. The stories follow Daniel and his friends navigating imperial pressure, eating royal food, bowing to golden statues, praying when prayer is illegal. Each time they choose faithfulness over compromise, and God vindicates them, sometimes spectacularly. These tales aren't just kids' stories, they're case studies in resistance. Then the book pivots. In chapter 7, Daniel stops interpreting other people's dreams and starts receiving his own terrifying visions. Four beasts, a little horn, heavenly courtrooms. The style becomes symbolic, coded, and cosmic. Instead of individual heroism, the focus shifts to the grand sweep of history and the collision between brutal empires and God's everlasting kingdom. Same theme, different literary gear. Let's revisit those famous court stories quickly, not as children's tales but as theological statements. Daniel 1. 4 Jewish youths refuse the king's rich food, likely tied to idolatrous rituals, and God honors their quiet resistance. The message? You can live in Babylon without becoming Babylon. Daniel 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse to bow to Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue, choosing potential death over idolatry. The fiery furnace shows that God's presence can be more real in suffering than in safety. Daniel 6. An edict bans prayer to anyone but the king. Daniel keeps praying toward Jerusalem, accepting the lion's den rather than compromising his ultimate loyalty. Each story pits empire's demand for total allegiance against covenant faithfulness. Miracles aren't magic tricks. They're declarations that earthly kingdoms, no matter how terrifying, are not ultimate. These narratives prepare us emotionally and theologically for the visions that interpret history through the same lens. One of Daniel's most debated topics is the identity of the kingdoms symbolized in dreams and visions, starting with Nebuchadnezzar's statue in Daniel 2. The statue has a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron and feet of iron mixed with clay. Then a stone not cut by human hands smashes the statue and becomes a mountain filling the earth. Most interpreters, ancient and modern, agree the golden head is Babylon. The silver is commonly identified as Medo-Persia, the bronze as Greece, and the iron as Rome, though some Jewish and critical scholars see a slightly different sequence with the final kingdom pointing to Hellenistic rulers like the Seleucids. However you map it, the core point is theological. Empires look impressive but are brittle. They rise and fall. The stone stands for God's kingdom, originating from God, not human power structures, ultimately displacing every oppressive system. Daniel 7 shifts from statue to monsters. Daniel sees 4 beasts rising from a chaotic sea: a winged lion, a bear raised on one side, a 4-winged leopard with 4 heads, and a terrifying 4th beast with iron teeth and 10 horns. This is symbolic apocalyptic art, not zoology. These beasts parallel the 4 kingdoms of chapter 2, but with the volume turned up on their inhuman brutality. The sea represents chaotic forces. Beasts are empires behaving like predators. Many scholars connect the lion with Babylon, the bear with Medo-Persia, the leopard with the rapid conquests of Greece, and the 4th beast with a later, uniquely crushing power, often read as Rome or a specific Hellenistic regime. The vision zooms out. Earthly thrones are temporarily given power, but behind them stands a heavenly court that can take away their dominion. Daniel 7 isn't about guessing creature identities for curiosity's sake. It's a critique of empire as dehumanizing and beastly. In the middle of that terrifying vision comes one of the most important scenes in all of apocalyptic literature: the heavenly courtroom. Thrones are set in place. The Ancient of Days takes his seat, clothed in white with hair like pure wool. Fire flows from his throne as a river. Thousands upon thousands serve him. Books are opened. Judgment falls on the beasts. Then Daniel sees one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven, presented before the Ancient of Days, and given dominion, glory, and an everlasting kingdom. Unlike the beastly empires, this figure is human-like, representing true, God-intended rule. In Jewish interpretation, this can symbolize the faithful people of God or a messianic figure. In Christian reading, Jesus strongly identifies with this title, Son of Man, especially in the Gospels and Revelation, signaling that his mission fulfills Daniel's vision of God's kingdom overthrowing an human empire. Daniel 8 narrows the lens to 2 animals: a ram with 2 unequal horns charging west, north, and south, and a male goat from the west with a prominent horn, moving so fast it seems to fly. The goat shatters the ram's horns, but its own big horn breaks, replaced by 4 smaller ones. From one of these arises a little horn that grows arrogant and attacks the sanctuary. Unlike some visions, Daniel 8 is partially interpreted within the chapter. The ram is explicitly called the kings of Media and Persia, and the goat is the king of Greece, whose large horn suggests Alexander the Great. The 4 horns echo his empire's division after his death. The little horn is widely linked to Antiochus IV Epiphanes, a Seleucid ruler who desecrated the Jerusalem temple in the 2nd century BC. Daniel reads his brutality as part of a larger pattern: arrogant rulers trampling God's people yet limited by divine sovereignty. Daniel 9 takes us into one of the most intricate and controversial passages, the 70 weeks or sevens. Daniel is praying about Jeremiah's prophecy of 70 years of exile. Gabriel responds with a vision of 70 weeks decreed for Daniel's people and holy city to finish transgression and bring in everlasting righteousness. Most scholars agree the weeks are symbolic sets of 7, often interpreted as years, yielding 490. Interpreters map these sevens differently. Jewish and many critical scholars see them culminating in events around the Second Temple, Antiochus IV, and rededication. Many Christian readings, especially in traditional and dispensational circles, see connections to the coming of the Messiah, the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and sometimes a future climactic period. The diversity of timelines shows this is not just a puzzle to solve, but a theological schema. History is not random, it's under God's measured sovereign oversight, even when oppression intensifies. Chapters 10 to 12 form Daniel's climactic vision, blending spiritual and political conflict. In chapter 10, Daniel fasts and mourns. Then a radiant heavenly figure appears, pulling back the curtain. Behind the scenes, princes of Persia and Greece, spiritual powers tied to earthly empires, are in conflict. History is portrayed as both geopolitical and cosmic. Chapter 11 gives a dense, symbolic description of future kings of the north and south, widely understood as detailed previews of Persian successors, Alexander, and the warring Ptolemaic and Seleucid dynasties. The text climaxes again around a contemptible king who desecrates the temple and persecutes the faithful, echoing Antiochus IV. Chapter 12 adds hope beyond catastrophe. Many who sleep in the dust will awake, some to everlasting life. Wise ones shine like stars. Daniel is told to seal the words until the time of the end, reminding readers that God's purposes go beyond the immediate crisis of any single empire. To read Daniel well, we must understand apocalyptic literature. It's a genre, not a code book. Apocalyptic uses vivid symbols, heavenly visions, and cosmic battles to unveil God's perspective on history, especially for communities under oppression. Think of it as resistance literature in symbolic form. Beasts aren't random monsters. They're political cartoons of empires. Horns symbolize kings or powers. Time spans like time, times, and half a time, or numbers like 7, 10, and 12 are often symbolic, communicating completeness, limitation, or covenant rather than exact dates. Apocalyptic aims less to satisfy curiosity about the calendar and more to fortify faithfulness and hope. It tells suffering people, history feels chaotic, but behind it stands a just God who will judge beastly power and vindicate his people. So when we approach Daniel, we should ask first, what is this symbol saying about power, faithfulness, and hope? Before we ask, where does it fit on my chart? Daniel has been interpreted in dramatically different ways. In early Judaism, it became a key text of resistance during persecution, inspiring groups like the Maccabees. In early Christianity, it shaped how believers understood Jesus as the Son of Man and framed expectations about God's kingdom subverting Rome. Later, church fathers, medieval theologians, and reformers mapped Daniel's kingdoms onto their own eras, seeing the fourth kingdom as Rome or its religious heirs. In modern times, dispensational approaches popularized detailed timelines, raptures, and future antichrists, largely built on Daniel and Revelation. Historically minded scholars emphasize Daniel's message to Jews suffering under Hellenistic rule, reading many details as past from our perspective. Devotional readers often focus on its lasting theological themes: God's sovereignty, courageous witness, hope beyond death, and critique of idolatrous power. A wise approach holds humility. Daniel offers genuine prophetic insight, but it isn't given for speculative date setting, it's given to produce faithful endurance. Let's gather the threads. Historically, Daniel speaks into life under empire, Babylon, Persia, Greek successors, possibly Rome, where God's people feel small and vulnerable. Literarily, It blends court tales and apocalyptic visions, using narrative and symbol to preach the same message from different angles. The kingdoms, whether statues, beasts, rams, or goats, represent human power systems that claim ultimacy but are temporary, beastly, and accountable. The heavenly court, the Ancient of Days, and the Son of Man declare that true authority is vested in God and in the human-shaped rule he endorses. For readers today, Daniel invites three responses. First, faithful non-assimilation, living in our own Babylons without bowing to their idols. Second, hopeful realism, recognizing that history includes real suffering yet is not out of control. Third, humble interpretation, resisting speculative obsession and letting Daniel form our character more than our charts. Hold on to those three as your mental summary. If this crash course helped Daniel feel less like an intimidating puzzle and more like a powerful, relevant book, don't let it stop here. Take some time this week to read Daniel straight through, stories and visions together, and notice how themes of empire, faithfulness, and hope keep repeating in different forms. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which part of Daniel still puzzles you? Which image, lion's den, fiery furnace, four beasts, Son of Man, hits you the hardest today, and why? Drop a comment below. I read them, and they help shape future deep dives. If you want more content that blends historical context with accessible explanation, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll know when the next crash course drops. And if you found this helpful, consider sharing it with a friend or group studying Daniel. Thanks for watching, and remember, no empire is ultimate. Live like you believe that.